Hey there, Heather, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 NCAA video. Well, I know it's a sports video, but we got to do the NCAA stuff today because, as you can see by the hat and as you can see by the shirt, I'm going to be repping the Arkansas Razorbacks today. And it is August the 30th. It is day one of college football. Arkansas does face an IAA, well, I call it IAA, but it's an FCS opponent. Whereas, like, Texas has to face Ohio State in one of the great games of the week, and it's on at Indian time. Of course, this is when it's being recorded. It's in the morning. Nevertheless, we're going to be talking about the Razorbacks' greatest moments in not just football but in basketball with this top 10. And number 10 is something very recent. It was beating Tennessee in 2024, the number 4 ranked team in the nation, with Nico Imaliva. The name sounds familiar because of how he kind of left Tennessee football over the NIL stuff, which is kind of crappy because, NIL stuff is ruining college basketball nowadays, college sports as a whole. But then they were hosting Arkansas in one of the few games that in one of the first games ABC would do for SEC matchups after taking over the rights from CBS. It was a big evening with Chris Fowler and Kurt Herstreet on the call, and the Razorbacks pulled a tight one against Tennessee and won the match. So it was big to see the Razorback fans be happy. That win was huge because it got Arkansas to 6 wins and got them to the Liberty Bowl where they beat Patrick Mahomes' alma mater, Texas Tech. Number 9 is the only non-football or baseball one, or basketball one, excuse me. It's the track and field dynasty of Arkansas. Arkansas has had some great moments in their track and field history, and none bigger, as it seemed, as the moment in which in 1992 they won the Triple Crown of track and field, cross country racing, on the beaten path, the indoor and outdoor championships too, nationally. It was just amazing what track and field could do for a school, strangely enough. Number 8 is the septuple headspin match against Kentucky in 2003. Arkansas already had played a 7 overtime game against Mississippi State and beat them. Then they went into Kentucky in 2003 and faced them in 7 overtimes, in which they won the game 71-63. It is what I call the longest game with an asterisk because I know that Penn State, Illinois, and Georgia Tech played games to 8 overtimes, but they play to the new rules that after the third overtime, you have to do a 2-point convert the score, and it's like kind of annoying AF. In the traditional 2003 sense, that you play football in overtime, in after 2 overtimes, if the score's tied, if you score a touchdown, you have to go for 2. Of course, both teams would have possession and all that. You got to beat or match. And Arkansas scored a touchdown with a 2-point convert. Kentucky did not even get in the end zone. Game over. Number 7 is the key game against Texas in 1969, what they called the game of the century. There's been many games that have been called the game of the century in the 20th century, but this one between Texas and Arkansas was huge. There's a book about it. I almost bought it, but I didn't. Anyway, number 1 Texas took on number 2 Arkansas in 1969 in the college football centennial season, because college football was built in 1869. Excuse me. It was so powerful that President Nixon even flown from the White House to Fayetteville, Arkansas, to watch the game. It was like amazing to see the president sitting in the stands with fellow fans. In a stroke of foreshadowing genius by ABC, they moved the Texas-Arkansas game, which was supposed to be in September, to December, the last week of the college football season, and it worked. Texas and Arkansas became 1 and 2, and they were going to fight each other for the crown. So what ends up happening, as cats are meowing in the background, is that Texas were down 14-0. Then James Street led them to a touchdown plus 2-point convert and a touchdown to win the game 15-14, ruining Arkansas's hopes and dreams, dashing them heavily. And number 6 is the massive Orange Bowl upset over Oklahoma in 1978. It was a fantastic moment, to be sure. And what ends up happening was that the Sooners were heavily favored. This was January 2nd, 1978, when determining a national champion was harder than you think. Notre Dame faced Texas in the Cotton Bowl. All the Irish had to do was beat Texas. Boom, there's a national championship in your horizon. They choked against Texas with Earl Campbell. Michigan was next in line to win the national championship if they could win the Rose Bowl against Washington. But a young quarterback by the name of Warren Moon, who caused chaos in the CFL a few years later, had other ideas. And the Razorbacks and the Wolverines got hit hard. Nebraska had a chance and failed, and then it was up to Oklahoma against Arkansas in the Orange Bowl. The worst part for Arkansas was that they had lost a few players to a dorm incident and all that, and some people walked out in solidarity. Rollie Sales, the third string running back, ran for 205 yards, which was an Orange Bowl record set until I can't remember who broke it, but nevertheless, Roland Sales did it, and the Razorbacks beat Oklahoma 31-6, shocking Oklahoma, ruining their national championship hopes, and Texas, of all teams, ended up being the champs. How about that? And number 5 is the massive college basketball run Arkansas has had in the 2020s. Arkansas basketball was big in the 70s. They had a Final Four appearance. They almost went to the Final Four in 1979, but lost at a last-second shot by Indiana State. And no, it wasn't Larry Bird who sunk the Razorbacks. It was Bobby Heaton. In 1981, U.S. Reed put up that half-court shot to win the game against Louisville. And Arkansas had some moments in the 90s, but couldn't produce. Well, they had one golden moment in 94, which I will talk about later. But in the 2020s, it was strange how, that decade has been great for Arkansas. 4 appearances in the 2020s in a 5-year span, and yet they've been to the Sweet 16 every time. In 2021, they were the 3 seed and beat Colgate, brushing them off, pardon the pun. And then they beat Texas Tech in the second round narrowly. Then they took on Oral Roberts, who I didn't take lightly because Oral Roberts was a 15 seed, got to the Sweet 16, but they could pull upsets out of their butts. But Arkansas won the game 32-70. And then in the Elite 8, they lost to Baylor 81-72. Baylor's a basketball school. It's not a basketball school, they're a football school. 2022, they took on Vermont in the first round, beat them. Vermont almost pulled off another upset, like Sorrentine in 2005. In the second round against NM State, they beat Pascal Siakam's alma mater. To the Sweet 16, they went against Gonzaga, who were looking for revenge after losing the national title game and their undefeated season. But somehow, in some way, my Razorbacks won 74-68 over the Sags, and then lost to the Elite 8 to Duke, 78-69. In 2023, as an 8 seed, they beat Illinois by 10 points, and then took on Kansas, which I felt was not going to happen. You can't beat Kansas. But they did, 72-71. The Sweet 16 was powerless as they lost to UConn 88-65 on their way to winning the national title. 2025, they beat Kansas in a shocker 79-72. I didn't pick Arkansas. I thought Kansas had it. And then you took on St. John's, the 2 seed, and beat them in Rick Pitino's son coaching that team. And they played out at Madison Square Garden. So Arkansas won 75-66. And then in the Sweet 16, they took on TT and lost in overtime 85-83. It was a close one. Worst off for the Razorbacks, they got a massive loss as they had the game well in hand. They fucked it up. At number 4 was upsetting the number 1 seed Texas Longhorns, getting kind of revenge for 69. So the number 1 seed Texas Longhorns got into Arkansas to take on the Razorbacks at War Memorial Stadium. And Texas was looking very fine. They were looking to win the national championship and all that. But Arkansas, the plucky Arkansas squad, led by quarterback Gary Anderson. I don't think that's the same Gary Anderson who was a running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as Tecmo Super Bowl on the SNES has taught me. But nevertheless, Arkansas beat Texas 42-11. It was big. You beat the number 1 team in the nation, yes, but to do it by 30 points, it's just amazing. And it ruined Texas's national championship hopes. I didn't do much for Arkansas, but at least they could prove they beat number one. And speaking of beating number one, that's what number three is. Beating LSU in 2007. It was a massive game. LSU, the craziness of the 2007 national title picture was huge. It started with App State beating Michigan on opening day, and then seemingly almost every week, either the one seed or the two seed or both would fall. It was like, who is really number one? LSU, despite losing in triple overtime to Kentucky in Kentucky, actually claimed to be number one and would take on Arkansas on what is now called Black Friday, the day after U.S. Thanksgiving in 2007. And the Razorbacks LSU game would be at the full national control of CBS, who did it for the Battle of the Golden Boot. It didn't help that Les Miles, the LSU coach, called Arkansas Arkansas and was looking forward to the SEC title game. The Razorbacks were a bit miffed by that and used not only Matt Jones at quarterback to help, but their three-headed running back attack of Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, and Peyton Hillis. Imagine having those three guys at the same backfield. That's just amazing in the 2000s. It was ecstasy for Arkansas fans. Using the option move, making all the running back moves, they actually beat LSU in triple overtime, as Arkansas did give up a touchdown to LSU in triple overtime, but on the 2-point convert, they picked it off, and the Razorbacks were the champs, in a sense, of the Golden Boot. LSU somehow, in some way, did still get to the national title game, thanks to Pitt beating West Virginia in the backyard brawl. And Ohio State, despite losing to Illinois, got to the title game too, but LSU won the title, and Arkansas fans are up in arms. At number two is the 1964 national championship game. Arkansas looked pretty impressive. Frank Broyles was the head coach and soon to be athletic director, and Arkansas was getting good with their defense, including Billy Ray Smith Sr. The Razorbacks were undefeated. They beat Nebraska in the Cotton Bowl 10-7. They were tied down to the Cotton Bowl because they were the Southwest Conference champs, and Nebraska were the Big Eight champs. But the fact of the matter was that it was amazing for Arkansas to go undefeated, unscathed, and partially have the national championship. Alabama claims part of the 64 title themselves, but still Arkansas got a title. And the big thing was it led to one of the biggest relationships in the 90s in the NFL. So to explain, Arkansas had two players on their squad named Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson, double J's. Little did we know that Jerry Jones would buy the Dallas Cowboys from Bum Bright, fire Tom Landry, and bring Jimmy Johnson in as head coach of the Cowboys. Sure, Dallas started off terrible, but they made a massive rebuild, and by 1993, they were the Super Bowl champs, back-to-back champs of that. Unfortunately, Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson, their relationship soured. And unfortunately, that's what happened. And at number one, it's got to be number one, is the 1994 Men's Basketball Championship, and influencing a 9-year-old from the small town of Plateau, Ontario, to be a Razorback fan through hell and high water. So it's 1994. The Razorbacks were coming off some great playoff runs in the 90s. They were the 4th seed in 1990. They beat Princeton, Dayton, North Carolina, who pulled off one of the biggest upsets in the second round when they beat number one Oklahoma. Or was it Texas? Yeah, it was at Oklahoma on a Rick Fox last-second shot. Canadian. So they beat North Carolina and then took on Texas in the Elite Eight and beat them 88-85. So as the 4th seed, they took on Duke, the powerful Duke with Coach Krzyzewski, and got their butts handed to them. But Duke paid the ultimate price by karma as they got blown out by UNLV in the championship game by more than 30 points. In 1991, they were a 1 seed. They beat Georgia State, Arizona State, and Bama before Kansas beat them 93-81. But karma bit Kansas in the butt because they did make the final, but lost to Duke. In 1992, as a 3 seed, they beat Murray State before Memphis beat them. And then in 1993, they were a 4 seed, beating Holy Cross and St. John's, only to beat North Carolina on their way to the national championship. Anyway, in 94, they were a top seeded team. They would take on North Carolina AT&T and beat them 94-79. Then Georgetown, they beat them 85-73, rooting John Thompson's stuff. And no, Allen Iverson did not play for that team. It was the next season he came on. In the Sweet 16 against Tulsa, Nolan Richardson's former club, they crushed Tulsa by 19. In the Elite Eight, in what people call the Battle of the Baggy Shorts, they took on Michigan, who were not who had members of the Fab Five, but not a whole lot, as Chris Webber did declare for the draft after the 93 debacle in the title game. But yeah, they beat Michigan 76-68. And then in the Final Four, they took on Arizona and Damon Stoudemire and beat them 91-82. Before facing Duke in the national championship game and beating Coach K 76-72 in one of the greatest moments of all time for Arkansas ever. And more importantly, it led a 9-year-old sports loving fan to actually cheer for Arkansas and stay with Arkansas. Because as someone who was watching the NCAA tournament on TV and on City TV, which is a specialty channel that sometimes does movies in the Electric Circus, if you're a 90s kid, you know that. The Razorbacks were in the title game, but City TV would simulcast with CBS for the coverage of the NCAA, and I decided to choose that team. Whoever wins would be my team for both football and basketball, and it ended up being Arkansas. It actually worked out well because Arkansas's football and basketball teams were good. Duke, well, they've had some decent football players. Daniel Jones notwithstanding, but yeah, the basketball team, yeah, sure for Duke. But come on, I'm a North Carolina guy. Sam Perkins, James Worthy, MJ, Antoine Jameson, Jerry Stackhouse, Vince Carter, even Tyler Hansbrough. The list goes on and on and on for good college football players. So anyway, that's my top 10 Arkansas Razorback moments. And now to end this with the pig SOOEY tune. Ooh, pig SOOEY. Ooh, pig SOOEY. Whoa, pig SOOEY. Razorback Jack. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.